I am the Weather Dude. Welcome back, and today we're going to be once again talking about our potential tropical storm, which would the next name would be Ophelia. And we're going to be watching that area again off the southeast coast, and we definitely have some updates to provide you with today. As always, be sure to like and subscribe so you do not, and of course, ring the bell so you do not miss a future video. And we're just going to get right into it here with the National Hurricane Center map. This is updated for the 8 p.m., although from 2 to 8, nothing really changed. Still a 10% chance to form in the next 48 hours, with in the next 7 days a 40% chance to develop. All right, so it's an area of non-tropical low pressure, and if you notice from the last video, the changes, there is now an X, meaning there is an estimated, low-level center somewhere in there or about to be there. All right, so now we kind of know where the low is forming, and may I add, it's pretty far south, right? And I'll talk about what that could mean here, of course, as the video goes on. It's a non-tropical low-pressure system expected to form in a large area of showers and storms off the east coast of the Florida Peninsula within the next, again, day or two. This storm could acquire some subtropical characteristics on Friday while it moves generally northward, right? And of course, regardless of development, there's going to be high winds, heavy rain, and high surf to portions of the mid-Atlantic and southeast. All right? So let's take a look on the satellite. Again, there's really not much there. You can kind of see Hurricane Nigel just zooming off here to the north and east. It's just a broad area of low pressure, just associated with some showers and thunderstorms. Eventually, all this energy you see here will eventually start to come together along that front, kind of spin up and potentially, really form that low pressure system as time goes on. But of course, as we know, it's just a stalled front at the moment. And essentially, what's going to happen is this high pressure that kept, the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast in beautiful weather for a day or two, and that's essentially going to back off to the north and east. So what you're essentially going to have is a high pressure here with an advancing low here, and that's just going to push in the winds because the high pressure winds rotate clockwise, low pressure counterclockwise, and it's going to kind of put the wind gradient right in here, okay? So while the high pressure gives us great weather, it might make things worse because the low and the high, having the wind in between the two, is only going to make the wind situation worse, which is why, again, regardless of development, wind will probably be one of the big things with this system. Of course, rain is always the biggest threat from these tropical systems, but wind will definitely be up there this time. So about where the low is estimated at or is at right now, sea surface temperatures are 86 degrees Fahrenheit. So that is pretty warm, and that could certainly form a tropical storm or a hurricane. I really do not think a hurricane is going to come of this, especially with the modeling that and the data that we have out now. I don't think there's not enough time. I'm not going to take it completely off the table, but at this point, I'm saying like a 5% chance. Because A, again, not enough time, and B, there's just too much wind shear. All right, because of what's steering it, it's going to be moving along a trough, and it's already going to be dealing with the front and all. It's going to be dealing with a lot of shear already, which is why this will probably become subtropical. Sometimes subtropical storms, form when there's maybe cooler water, but this time the water is not the issue. It's just going to be the wind shear. We'll talk about that later on in the video as well. But you can see the Gulf Stream right here. Okay, so the low will probably form somewhere down by the Bahamas off the coast of Florida. It will slowly spin around and move to the north, probably over the Gulf Stream. We'll get a last-minute boost of energy and strength, and it'll probably come on shore somewhere in North Carolina. Now, the question is, at this point, does it take a kick westward, kind of go up this way, or does it keep going up the coast? And I'll talk about what each scenario will mean here in just a second. But you can kind of see another map of those sea surface temperatures. Anywhere in that orange, look at the key down here. You can see at the bottom of your screen, 29 to 31 degrees Celsius, anywhere in this zone. So this is where the low is or is expected to be very soon. And you can kind of see it's probably going to stay in that 29 to 31 degrees Celsius water range, which is that's about 85 to 88, okay, in that range of water temperatures, which is very warm. All right, so that is certainly one of the things that'll be going for the storm as a positive, is going to be those sea surface temperatures. Also, the oceanic heat content, and why I was saying the storm forming further south could help it a lot is because closer to the Bahamas you go, you kind of see that deep red, right? That really high oceanic heat content that's not like in the Bahamas. Like the storm is practically sitting here, or at least the estimated low center is sitting right here, so it's not far away from those. It's just past those very deep reds, right, where we have again very warm water far below the ocean surface. That's what this map is representing. Of course, combine that with the warm sea surface temperatures. But still, greens, yellows, oranges will still be, even as the storm moves farther to the north, it will still have a little bit of oceanic heat content to work with, which is another thing that, it's not, it's still going to be working with the system. It's certainly not going to be working against it, right? I mean, the only place, like, in this blue up here is where we have, like, no oceanic heat content. And then, of course, we have it all down here. Right, so the storm forming further south, say in here, right, as opposed to maybe up here like it was originally supposed to, will give the storm maybe a little bit more time over water, and of course maybe some warmer and deeper ocean waters to work with. All right. So tropical intensity index looking slightly unfavorable in this region right now. I do expect that to change. Maybe things will lean a little bit more towards favorable over the next day or two. Right. But so right now, a little slightly unfavorable there on the development index. If we look at the Saharan air layer, there was a lot of dry air here last time because we had the front come through, brought dry air with it. That's pretty much fizzled. I mean, there's really nothing in the path. Yes, there's some dry air by the mid-Atlantic and northeast, specifically, kind of behind Nigel as it kind of makes its exit with the high pressure dominating there, of course. But this will back away once that high pressure backs away. All right. And by the way, this is the map of the Saharan air layer. This here is just pretty much dry air. That's not actual Saharan dust. All right. This coming off of Africa is. All right, but this is also just another map to show you the dry air content. All right, if we look here at the 850 millibar vortice signature, again, you can see it's a large disorganized area of energy, right? You can kind of see it over the Gulf of Mexico. All this is all attached to that front. And this will eventually, again, all kind of come together and then start spinning and then form an eventual broad area of low pressure. And then you can see our other disturbance that we're watching out in the Atlantic. We'll see who can get the Ophelia name first. A lot of people are saying it's going to lean towards this storm on the off the southeast coast. Could potentially get the Ophelia name first. But you can see right here, there's Hurricane Nigel just spinning away there. All right, so you got Hurricane Nigel there, right? And then we got, of course, the storm over here, which, by the way, in the upper level wind steering is, and the reason if you look at the satellite, it kind of looks like how the convection's kind of getting pushed off to the east like this. You kind of see that. That's because of the wind steering currently, which is kind of directing the convection out this way, right? The low pressure center itself isn't really going anywhere because it's a stalled front, right? The storm center itself isn't really going anywhere, or what center eventually develops, but the convection is getting blown off to the east, right? It's getting sheared off a little bit. We'll look at the wind shear map too in just a sec. But essentially what's going to happen is you're going to have this high pressure, this upper level high pressure that's over Mexico right now. And it's eventually going to move to the north over the plains. And it's going to bring that ridge, because obviously the ridge has to go around it. It's going to bring the ridge up with it. And what goes up must come down. So the ridge is essentially going to fall over the southeast and then kind of sort of come up like this. So that storm that's sitting right where I just circled in black here, right, is going to get pulled north because, of course, we know the jet stream, I'll draw a few arrows, kind of moves in this direction, right? Kind of goes west to east, right, left to right. So it's going to pull that storm to the north along with it. Now, some questions do remain. For example, does the trough follow the system, right? Does the trough keep moving east, pushing the system north, but also kicking it to the east a little bit? Or maybe it does a really deep dive and it comes up like this, maybe giving a little kickback to the west. We'll see. You'll see a couple of models supporting that idea. All of these things, and of course, what the high pressure up here does, right? All of these things are going to be dependent on where the storm goes. I know it almost sounds like an excuse because I feel like with a lot of tropical systems, especially, we like to say like, oh, there's so much uncertainty, there's so many things, and we promise it's not an excuse. It's just true. Right? There's so many things because, again, everything is connected when it comes to the weather, right? So everything depends on what this does and what that does, right? And these all determine, what could happen to these storms as they move on. Now let's take a look at the wind shear really quick, and then we'll start getting into our modeling here. So as you can see, off the east coast, wind shear has been dropping by 10 knots over the past 24 hours. You can kind of see where the storm is, though. Still pretty high shear in this area, right? Talking 50, 60 knots. Very high. I mean, it would just shred the thing apart, which is, again, why subtropical is in the talks, right? This will probably become subtropical, but it's still possible we could see tropical storms. So this is a potential, right? It's a potential tropical storm. It's potentially getting tropical characteristics. And I've actually been checking, and I can't actually wait for this thing to become an invest, which now that the National Hurricane Center kind of put this X here, right? Meaning there's some sort of center. Hopefully that means the invest maybe will be released soon, because that means we can start actually getting like other model tracks on it, and a lot more models will jump on it, right? There'll be like a whole new round of tracking available for it. The Hurricane Hunters will probably start flying into it. So hopefully, that it gets named and invest soon, so we can get some better updates on that. But looking again at the wind shear, yeah, it's looking like a lot of it. And even though it has been slightly dropping, right, because the front has moved this way, there's still a lot, and of course there will be, especially as that trough digs through. And I do believe if it becomes an invest, I believe the next one, because we've been through the rotation a couple of times at this point. I believe 99L is next. I could be wrong, because I believe we had like 97 and 98 form out in the Atlantic, so I think 99 would be next. But anyway, we look at the GFS model to see what the models are showing now. So you can kind of see it's the 18Z latest run. There's a low pressure center, right? You can kind of see that gradient, right? Those pressure isobars getting packed together, resembling strengthening and wind, right? Then you can see the high pressure up here, right? Meaning more, right? Wind this way, we got wind coming in from this way. It's all just going to get packed in here. And you can see this is probably the strongest I have seen this storm so far. 988 millibars of pressure on landfall in eastern North Carolina, not too far away from Cape Hatteras, between Wilmington and Cape Hatteras. But what you're also noticing is, again, look at all the convection, right? There's still a good bit associated with the low, but there's a big chunk of convection out here in the Atlantic. And what is believed to be happening here, at least on this model simulation, is that the trough, there's like a lot of shear pushing upward on it. So while it is steering the storm northward, it's like northeast almost, right? So it's kind of pushing that convection. It's kind of breaking it away from the system. All right, but the winds are also strengthening, right? At least the pressure is dropping. So, and of course, quote unquote eye wall. I won't really call it an eye wall, kind of, but it kind of is. But on that north and western side is where that heaviest rain is and wind. All right, and that comes on the shore in North Carolina, right? And even though there's a big chunk of precipitations off the coast of the mid-Atlantic and kind of scraping like Cape Cod, for example, there still is going to be a lot of convection associated with the main low, which, by the way, is moving pretty slow because here it is over eastern North Carolina, making its landfall Saturday late morning. And then by Sunday late morning, 24 hours later, the storm center went from here to here. So it's not moving all that much. Right, and you kind of see the storm kind of just sitting over D.C. with another heavy batch of rain moving over the I-95 corridor from D.C. to Philly up to New York. Then the low kind of meanders around and then weakens finally, and the rain tapers off in the late Monday. This would not be a good scenario because even though the storm would move inland and theoretically the wind would be weaker, it's going to bring more rain to places further inland, meaning it's going to impact more people because if it stays near the coast, don't get me wrong. A lot of people do live on the beach, but if it goes inland and affects the I-95 corridor, this is where a lot of people live, especially between DC and Boston, right? So if that comes inland, a lot more people are going to be impacted by this than say if the rain just stuck to the immediate coastline, which is another possibility, as you'll see with some of the models. But it essentially comes down to, is it kind of going to go up this way, or is it going to kind of just go up off the coast? Either way, the coastline probably looks like you're going to get some type of pretty heavy rain. And if we look at the GFS model here, how much rain is forecast on the latest model run, you can see where it makes landfall, where that low center goes. The heaviest rain seems to go with it, 4 to 6 inches from, say, Richmond and just south of DC, kind of down to Wilmington, North Carolina. Still, Baltimore to Philly, like 2 to 4 inches of rain, right? Some places closing in on 4 there, kind of like in northern Delaware right there. Right? So still very heavy rainfall, especially in the time period that we're talking about. And this is exciting considering I'm a resident of the Mid-Atlantic. This is nice to see finally a storm coming up here. And it's nice because it's not like a Category 5 hurricane that'll destroy everything, but it's still a storm to get excited about and track, right? So that's, of course, nice. Of course, as long as it doesn't, harm anybody, of course, that's, all we wish with these storms, right? But if we look here at the European model, which is our model that's next, you can kind of see, again, the big rain swath that's just coming up from the south here. And, of course, this will be, of course, the trough that's pulling this thing northward. The storm interacting with the trough, yes, there will be more shear, but it's going to kind of be like what happened to Lee, right? It interacted with the trough. It did get sheared a little bit. It did weaken, but the storm expanded. Well, this is going to be interacting with a trough, and it will probably also expand. So the European model is kind of a little bit lackluster, if that makes sense. I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying it's lackluster compared to the others. You can see the majority of the rain, or almost all of the rain, is offshore completely. And then we see a little bit of rain off the I-95 corridor, points southeast, but it really never makes landfall over North Carolina. It just kind of keeps moving up the coast. Now, if this were like a lot of storms, or even winter storms as well, if the low is sitting off the coast, you're getting rain and snow all over here. But not with this one, because again, the shear is kind of going this way, so all the convection's gone while the low center kind of follows right behind it. All right, so even though the low's right offshore, there might not be much precipitation, even for areas on the coastline. So definitely a lackluster version here. The only places that even get close to 2 inches of rain are the very immediate coastline, for example, in the Delmarva and like a little bit in North Carolina. But even like the Jersey Shore barely gets an inch. The I-95 corridor really doesn't get anything. It's pretty much southeast of the 95, you get some form of rain, right? So, I mean, for people who don't like rain, flooding, and wind, I guess this would be your ideal solution, right? The European model. But of course, these models have yet to change, especially because the low really hasn't gotten organized and together yet, and also because of the fact that it's going to be swirling around. And again, especially with storms that move slower at first, it's even more difficult than it already is to predict where they're going to go. And so with those factors added up, it's just an uncertainty doomsday scenario, if that makes sense. But Canadian has been interesting, and they've been consistent with their forecasts. So if we look at this model run, you can kind of see low off the coast of North Carolina, 1,000 millibars off the Carolina coastline. You can kind of see the moisture plume just getting sent up the coast. I mean, there's a big plume of moisture. The rain comes into the Mid-Atlantic, especially northern Mid-Atlantic region, by Saturday morning, maybe even late Friday night, probably Saturday morning. And then it's just like a swath of heavy rain. I mean, from D.C., Baltimore, Wilmington, Philadelphia, and then all the way down to the Delmarva, including New Jersey. Just a swath of heavy rain lasts for like 6 to 12 hours. Just that heavy swath of rain alone. Then it kind of just keeps going up the coast, and New England just gets pummeled with this rain as well. So, the Canadians definitely been kind of on this solution for a while now. So even though they don't have it going that far west, they kind of have the heaviest rain directly north of the center, whereas some of the other models kind of had it over here to the east-northeast of the center. Right? And then some models had the heaviest rain kind of around the center. So again, they're disagreeing with the organization process. I mean, this low is setting right off the coastline. I mean, with the heavy rain in here, the rain's just going to be coming down, right? And of course, this lasts for the Mid-Atlantic all the way, starts Saturday morning, probably will linger around through Saturday or Sunday morning, so probably at least a 24-hour rain event, maybe for some areas even more. So look at these rainfall totals. Widespread, especially along the coast. 4 to 8 inches of rain, anywhere from Cape Hatteras, which could see closer to 8 inches. The Delaware coast could see 9 inches. The Jersey Shore could see 8 inches. New York could even see 4 to 6. Boston, 4 to 5 inches. And even the 95 quarter, even places inland, can still see 2 to 4 inches of rain at least. And of course, this will be with wind added on top of that. We cannot forget about the wind, because even if some people be like, oh, it's just wind, it blows the trees around, it also does push the water on shore. Right? And that we certainly do have to be cognizant of over the next couple of days. All right, let's take a look here at the RDPS, which is kind of like a higher resolution version, if you will, of the Canadian model that we just looked at. So if we take a look here, you can see as we play out over the next 24 hours, you can kind of see the storm forming off to the south. I actually skipped the 48 hours. So you can see the low moves from the south, all right? And you can kind of see it goes here, but then it kind of does a little kickback to the west, right? So it's kind of the rain's coming on shore in places like Wilmington, North Carolina. And you can kind of see the storm moving to the north over eastern North Carolina. You can see the massive, massive rain swath that starts early morning Saturday, depending on where you are. Maybe areas further south in the Mid-Atlantic, maybe like Friday night. And it just keeps moving, right? Heavy rain as the center moves right up through Maryland, right up through Delaware and New Jersey, and that's where it stops. So, yeah, using the mesoscale models, because we're still a few days away from the event, some of the mesoscale models don't go quite out far enough. So when I show you these rainfall totals I'm about to show you, they will not be complete, right? So probably expect a little more than what's actually shown here. Like, expect this 2 to 3 inch region probably to be expanded northward. But going off what we have here, at least through 2 a.m. Sunday, 2 to 4 inches for the northern Mid-Atlantic states, and I kind of consider that like Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. And then like the southern mid-Atlantic, so like eastern Virginia and North Carolina, right, parts of the southeast here, still 4 to 6 inches, if not close to 8 or 9, even down by Wilmington, right, 8 to 10 inches of rain, which is a lot. Okay, especially again in a 24-ish hour period. If you look at the NAM model, again, same thing with the NAM. It might not go out, right? The whole storm might not be captured on this, but you can still see, right, where we're gonna have those bands of heavy rain. Of course, we have the swath of heavy rain, but heavy bands located in it could provide locally higher totals than what is shown. But NAM is honestly a little bit lackluster as well because yeah, they do have a big rain band. The storm kind of goes pretty far west, but there's not much convection and thunderstorms around the center, and it kind of just a big swath of rain moves through a little bit of banding inside of it, and then that's pretty much the whole storm. All right. So again, the whole thing might not be captured on here, but yeah, this is honestly not as lackluster as the European model because we still see 1 to 2 inches of rain going well inland here. But we do have still, again, I just want to drill that point home. Those multiple points where 2 to 4 inches of rain inside those localized areas is certainly possible. All right, and as we wrap up here, we're going to take a look at the wind aspect of the storm because I feel like we've been focusing a lot on the rain and, of course, the strength. But we got to focus on the wind aspect as well because, again, wind is still dangerous, especially when the ground is wet because it makes it easier for the trees to blow down. But also, of course, with that water being pushed on shore, of course, that is certainly, that's certainly what the wind does as well, and it could result in a storm surge. All right, so if we look at the NAM 3K, I'm just like a higher resolution version of the NAM that we looked at just now. You can see as the storm moves off from south to north, you kind of see in there, and I like using pivotal weather because it kind of you got to pinpoint the wind strength better. The NAM has the winds at about 48 knots, which is a little over 55 miles an hour. So that's a pretty strong tropical, or again, I'm just calling it tropical storm because that's just like it's just an easier way for me to call instead of calling it sub all the time. But it will probably become a subtropical storm unless we see some models showing a little bit more organized, like they have in some show the convection. If the convection is separated from the center, that clues you in it's probably going to be subtropical. If the convection is around the center in some fashion, it might become tropical. But either way, tropical, subtropical, doesn't really matter. That's why I don't want to get caught up in the naming because either way, high winds, heavy rain will be present for somebody, and of course, coastal flooding. But you can see as the storm moves to the north, now we see a strength of 993 millibars, and you can kind of see those winds there getting up above right around 53 knots. That's closing in on about that's actually about 60 miles an hour. So that's a 60 mile an hour tropical storm at this point, and it will continue to move to the northwest or west northwest, whatever you want to call it, as it continues to strengthen here. This is like late Friday evening. Again, still holding that 60 mile per hour wind strength. But I do want to take note of this as well. Let's dial it back here. So anywhere like that pinkish is, and by the way, I want to point out these are sustained surface winds, right? These do not count wind gusts. Wind gusts could be higher than what's shown here. Pinks represent 25 to 30 mile per hour winds or higher, okay? Look at the storm. It's all the way down here, right? It's still off the coast of South Carolina. And we still had an onshore push already happening. New Jersey and Delaware and then Maryland and Virginia right there. It's already happening. This is like Friday morning, early to mid-morning. We already have an onshore push. You can see off the Delaware beaches, that's about 25 mile an hour winds, sustained surface winds. All right. Because the wind field is going to kind of expand with this. And again, do not forget, it's also because of that high pressure. That's going to be steering the winds this way, right? Which is kind of like you're seeing the winds up here, and then the low pressure is feeding the winds down here, right? So again, this is why the Mid-Atlantic will, especially northern Mid-Atlantic, will get hit hard by this because it's kind of sandwiched in the middle of that high and that low pressure. So Friday morning, all right, we already have winds of over 25 miles an hour sustained, and as the low moves closer, the winds will only go higher, right? Now we're almost talking about tropical storm force winds at the beaches already here in Delaware and New Jersey. Already, okay, and this is like late Friday evening, and the low is still barely made landfall at all. So, yes, this will be definitely a dangerous wind event as well, and then still going on into Saturday and probably into Sunday as well, right? 40 plus mile an hour winds, still pushing the water on shore, so coastal flooding will certainly be a problem. All right, so we're actually going to just skip over here to the wind gust map. I'm running a little lower on time. I don't want to go too long, but if we take a look here. You can see Again, as it comes on shore, boom, there's your peak wind gust, 60 knots. That's about 70-mile-an-hour winds. A wind gust here that we could see. And even as the low, you can see tight circulation as it moves on shore, it's over land. Still could see winds of over 50, 55-mile-an-hour gusts over the mid-Atlantic. And the low would just sit there. We're still seeing winds of 30 knots before the low finally pulls away and offshore. So I know that was definitely a bit of a longer video, but it's definitely an exciting storm to talk about. Again, it's going to be impacting millions of people, especially if it hits that 95 quarter. And it could be tens of millions of people, if not more. So definitely keep an eye on the system. Definitely keep it here for updates. I am the Weather Dude, signing off. Till next time, I'll catch you guys in the next video.